Yes, folks, we're going to be on the pitch for the first time on Google Hangout. Apologies for the previous little snafu there as we were getting to know the technology. I'm Phil, of course, joined with Ian Joy, and delighted to be joined with the fantastic Danny Higginbotham, who's just back from Old Trafford watching the Manchester United game. How's things, boys? You all have a nice Christmas?
Yes, very good. A little bit of a break today because obviously having the young ones running around and they got very excited. So it was nice to get involved in a little bit of football and then get back to the family as well.
Let's just say it was a wild Christmas at my house. 2 under 2, then a 10-year-old. It was a pretty crazy Christmas, but certainly enjoyable. So Merry Christmas to everyone out there who's watching live with us.
Definitely.
You still putting apples and oranges in the kids' stockings for Christmas, Ian? You know,
that's all they're getting for Christmas, Phil. Apples, oranges, pennies here and there. That's about it. But nah, it was great. The kids are bright. You know, they had a great time. My 10-year-old's a little bit more difficult because you've got to try and please her with cell phones and bikes and every single thing that's out there in the gadget world. But nah, it was great. We had a wonderful Christmas.
All right, let's get the Manchester United game today. Danny, you were up at Old Trafford, mate. It's been a very different Manchester United the last few weeks, or really the last few months. They've had a problem finishing teams off. Mkhitaryan came on today and was absolutely sensational. What are you seeing at Manchester United?
I think one of the biggest complaints when Van Gaal was manager was that it was lackluster, it was slow to develop, they weren't creating chances, in particular at home. And in recent months, the problem has been at home is not putting the ball in the back of the net. You know, they've had a lot of chances, but they've not taken them. The manager can't do anything about that. But they've started to put them away. Now, there was a little bit of a nervousness about Old Trafford today when it was 1-0 after about 50 minutes, 55 minutes, because people were thinking, oh no, here we go again. We see Stoke City, we see Arsenal that have both come back from a goal down. But the difference is now for Manchester United, you bring, like you quite rightly said, Mkhitaryan came on, made such a big difference. They've got more match winners now in the team than they've had in a long time. They don't have to be so reliant on one player, and goals can come from anywhere. And they got the deserved result. Pickford was outstanding in goal for Sunderland, and it was an interesting battle between him and Ibrahimovic. But to be able to bring on a player like Mkhitaryan from the bench, you know, just shows you the strength that they've got in depth now.
Yeah, first and foremost, fantastic job again, Danny. It was really entertaining watching this morning. The game was great. I agree with you as far as the waiting patiently for that second goal. It's almost as if it's been something that's happened all too common for Manchester United recently. They're sitting on that 1-goal lead. You're waiting for them to score that second goal and give them that little cushion. And it just didn't come until they made that excellent substitution. Mkhitaryan, we know how good he is, but he's starting to prove it now in the Premier League. And people are now starting to believe, okay, maybe this was worth the money that Manchester United paid for him. Maybe we will get to see the best out of him. We know he's a talented player. That goal, clearly, as you mentioned on the broadcast as well, was offside. The linesman just disappeared. I'm not quite sure why. But it was worth letting it go because it was that good. It was a fantastic finish. And nobody really talks about the offside. Everyone's talking about how great that goal was. And I thought the overall performance from United today was exceptional.
It was good, and one of the interesting things was that at the end of the game, you know, a few people had messaged me saying, well, the goal was clearly offside. And I was like, yeah, of course it was offside, but you know what? I'm not going to go on and on and on about the fact that it was offside. It was a sensational finish. If the goal gets disallowed for it being offside, yes, of course, then you address it, you know. So we addressed it a little bit, talking about that it was offside, but the goal itself was a moment of genius, and everybody, barring the Sunderland supporters, the management and the players, will have been admiring the goal. And it didn't have an effect on the game as well, which is the most important thing.
I remember Zlatan scoring a goal like that, Danny, for Paris Saint-Germain back in the day. I think a couple of years ago, he scored a goal against Bastia where he backheeled it into the top corner. He's tried it once or twice already for United, and it hasn't quite come off for him. So to see Mkhitaryan pull it off like that, I mean, out of the air from the cross from Zlatan, was fantastic. And the overall performance, I mean, you just touched on it right there, Danny, and Phil, you talked about it at the top of the show. United are back to being one of the more entertaining sides in Europe again, and that's what everybody's waiting for from Manchester United. They want to see entertainment. Mourinho's doing a great job there. He needed some time to get his team sorted out. Pogba's playing with confidence now. He looks like a real threat from midfield going forward. Valencia, for me, has been fantastic getting forward, and also defensively, very solid. So overall, the starting 11 today was pretty solid.
I think one of the things is as well is that there's been a slight tactical change, as in terms of Michael Carrick. You know, spoke glowingly about him before. He's so important now to Manchester United, and what I believed earlier in the season is that at times when Pogba was playing as a number 10, he had his back to the opposition goal. That's not his strength, and Ibrahimovic was being isolated. But now, because you've got Michael Carrick sitting, you know, just in front of that midfield, sitting just behind that midfield four, it gives the license for the midfield four to get high up the pitch and support Ibrahimovic. And what you see more often than not is that when that front five are attacking the midfield four and Ibrahimovic is the deepest of the five. And that suits him perfectly because he's got runners getting beyond him. And for a centre-back, there's real problems because if I'm playing against him, it's a difficult one. What do? Do you drop him with Ibrahimovic? Because if you drop him with him, you're leaving a huge space behind you. But if you don't drop him with him, he gets the ball and then turns and does what he wants to do. And that's been the key to it. The little adjust is in terms of the system, but also willing runners getting beyond Ibrahimovic.
Danny, a lot of talk about this young Swedish lad, Lindelof, coming in January. Yeah. And we look back to when defenders come into football clubs in January, and it's always a difficult transition. I remember when Abraham Vidic came in, two experienced defenders, it took 6 months for them to come to grips with the Premier League. But if United are going to go out and spend 35 million on a young defender, they're going to expect him to play. Is that a risk bringing him in January, especially when you look at the form of Rojo and Jones?
I think it could be. I've seen a little bit of him. I saw him when he played for Sweden in the under-21s tournament a couple of years back when they won it, and they beat Portugal in the final. I've seen him on a couple of occasions this season for Benfica against Napoli in the Champions League, and he looks a good player. I think one of the things that Manchester United may be looking at with him, which would be a bit surprising when you're paying that amount of money, is the fact that he actually started off as a right back. So could it be a case if he comes in and he could be seen as maybe a first choice centre back, but can also play it right? But I do agree with you. I think January signings, they're few and far between in terms of the ones that are successful. Because in an ideal world, you have a full pre-season with your team. You get to know the players. You get to know the way that the manager wants you to perform. And it can be tough. I think straight away you look at it and think, right, okay, if he does go, he can't play for Manchester United in Europe. And like you've just said, I think it was interesting today to look at Mourinho, what he did with the two centre-backs. So Rocco played and Jones played. Bailly could have come back in, but the fact is Bailly is only available for 2 more games, then he goes away with the African Cup of Nations. So he's trying to build a partnership there with Rocco and Jones. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in January. But for £38 million, that has to be a starting centre-back or right-back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when you're trying to make a transfer in that January transfer window, that has to be the perfect match for your team to try and advance them going forward towards the end of the season to win trophies. Everything has to work with that signing. If you're going to spend a lot of money, maybe they're patient about it. They can try and bleed them into the team slowly, but that's not why you make a signing in January. If you want to make a signing in January, you're bringing someone in to have an immediate impact on that team. Defensively, my biggest question would be about the two centre-backs. Can they consistently perform at this level, at the highest level, the elite level on the European stage, domestically as well, week in and week out to win trophies for Manchester United? That's my big question as to why they would want to go into the transfer market. Rojo and today Jones was very good. They were very solid. And I think that consistency, if they can find that, it's a good partnership. But I still would be interested to see Manchester United going into the transfer window and looking to buy that rock, that developing young centre-back who's exciting, someone who can come in and have an immediate impact with the team and try and find some sort of consistency along that back line. So far, United have done a pretty decent job defensively this season, and I think it's getting better.
Yeah, I think when you look at Rocco and Jones, it's a very unusual partnership, because if you look at all your fantastic partnerships over the years, centre backs, whether it be central midfielders or centre forwards, it's opposites. So you look at Manchester United recent seasons, Rio Ferdinand and Vidic. Vidic was the one that wanted to go and head and kick everything, and Rio Ferdinand would be the one that would sweep everything up behind him. But I think what you've got in Jones and Rocco is two defenders that actually want to go and win the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, because if you've got two defenders that want to do that, then there could be space in behind at times. But that's where Michael Carrick comes in, because I think what he does, in situations where Rocco and Jones may actually want to go and win the ball, Carrick's already there. So, for example, there was a few times today, and Ichibi, who playing for Sunderland, who's been a standout player for them since he came in against Bournemouth, he was dropping a little bit deep to go and win the ball. And you could see Carrick verbally saying to Jones and to Rocco, listen, don't go in with him. I will mark him. You stay nice and compact with the two full-backs. So that's key. So as much as Rocco and Jones have been outstanding together, I think Michael Carrick has a huge part to play in that, in the triangle that they form between the three of them.
Can I ask you a quick question before we move on?
Yeah.
I know that Rojo has been in the press recently from escaping a couple of these challenges, you know. As an aggressive player yourself and potentially one of the better defenders around to come through that youth academy, what do you think about these challenges that he's making? Is it just something you have to accept from a South American player who's passionate about the game? Is it sometimes he's not thinking about going into these challenges? Because in the Premier League, more often than not, you get heavily punished for making challenges like that. We've seen it more than once.
Yeah, he's been very fortunate. You know, I think most people would say that both of them could have been red cards against Crystal Palace and against Everton. I think he needs to learn, because if you're going to continue to be erratic like that, the thing is within the Premier League, because it's global, because everybody's watching it, because the referees are keeping their eye on everything. He has to be careful now, because he will get a reputation. And he may actually unfairly at some point get sent off when he shouldn't do. So he has to learn quickly, because you cannot be erratic for too long in the Premier League, because you will get caught out. The opposition will look at you as a weak link as well and say, right, okay, let's wind him up. Let's get him into a challenge which he won't want to be in. And therefore, Manchester United could end up with 10 men. So he's got to learn quickly. I don't think it's something that you can put up with. I think if you're saying a player can sulk, but is a world-class player, that's something you would put up with. But is in terms of the situation with Rocco, he won't get away with that again, because, you know, I think everybody would admit that he was very fortunate not to get 2 red cards.
I'd give him a pay rise, Danny.
So would I. Danny, before we move on from United, mate, when you look at Mourinho, for me, he's getting all the big decisions right. And one of the biggest accusations that you make against a manager who's struggling is there's no consistency in the lineup. You don't know the strongest 11. I think Mourinho now, you're seeing consistency in the lineup, and you're starting to see the players that he trusts. You can now more or less name 7 or 8 of his starting lineup. You know who's going to be in there, give or take 1 or 2 positions. I saw Martial come on today, and you can see he's desperate to prove a point. He's got players that are on the fringes that know, listen, we're not going to tolerate anything other than 110%. I think you're looking at a Mourinho, Manchester United, where he got Wayne Rooney decision right. He now knows his best 7 or 8. And I think he's maybe 2 or 3 signings away from this being a championship challenging team.
I think the one thing is with Mourinho, I think you're quite right to say that he knows 7 or 8 of his first team players now, the ones that are going to be on the team sheet. I think the problem is that he had earlier in the season, you know, I'm sure Ian would say the same thing. It's the spine of the team is the most important thing, without question. I always say the spine of the team is your root, and you have the branches at the side. And to a certain extent, you can get away with certain players playing in them wider areas. But earlier on in the season, you look at how many centre-half partnerships he had. You know, Bailly was the mainstay. Then he got injured. Chris Smalling's played there. Blint's played there. Rocco's played there. Jones has played there. So there's been no real consistency at centre-back. Central midfield, Carrick only recently has come into the team. We saw Herrera playing at times. We saw Fellaini playing at times. Pogba was always playing. So he's never had a consistent spine. Whereas I think if we look at it now, okay, Bailly at the moment, he's sitting on the bench. And that for me is because he's going to the African nations. But most games now, we see De Gea, Jones, Rocco, Carrick, Herrera, Pogba, Ibrahimovic. And that's what we're starting to see now in near enough every game. So if you've got that consistent spine, the rest of the players can work around that. So you will see changes at left back, as we have done. Valencia, the majority of the time, he is playing right back. And you'll see the fluctuation of the wide players behind Ibrahimovic, which isn't an issue. But the spine of the team, the stronger you have that and the more consistent it is, the more success you're going to get. And that goes back to any team in any country that's been dominant. You know, you look at Manchester United in the 90s. Schmeichel, Bruce, Pallister, Keane, Ince, and then you go further forward than that. You look at Stam, Johnson, York, Cole, Keane, Butt. So there was always continuity, and that's what you need at the spine of the team.
I think any team you've ever played in as well, Dan, you'll agree with that, that there's always that sort of enjoyment when you know the players that you're playing alongside, because you know week in and week out what you're going to get from those players. So most of the successful periods you've had as a former player will have been with pretty much the same starting 11, same 9 players at least, where you know on the training ground, you know when you get on the field exactly what that player next to you is going to do, what you're going to get from those players, and it gives you confidence yourself. And obviously the team then benefits from that. So I've been really impressed with what I've seen from Mourinho. Me and Phil talked a couple of months ago on Mourinho and the pressure that he was under from the media. Obviously the criticism because United weren't winning games. They were drawing games. They were winning games 1-0. They were losing games 1-0. It simply wasn't good enough for everybody. Now his win percentage rate wasn't as good as the previous 2 managers. And we always said, you give him some time to implement his own ideas, to try and get his ideas across to his team, get his starting 11, at least as close to his starting 11 as possible, consistently playing, and United will come good. As far as what Phil just said there right now, though, as being a title challenger, they're not far away from it, but it's going to be very difficult to stop Chelsea now with the way that they're playing.
No, next season. I
think what's interesting this season is that if we look at top 5 or 6 at the moment, so we look at Chelsea, we look at Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal, Manchester United, and Tottenham. If we were to talk about Manchester City, started this season unbelievably well. Are they as good as what they were at the start of the season, the way they're performing? I'd probably say no, they're not performing to that magnitude at the moment. Liverpool, are they performing to what they were at the start of the season? You could probably question and say maybe they aren't. Chelsea, without question, they are. Arsenal, they're not performing as well as they were at the start of the season. Tottenham, a little bit hit and miss at times. Manchester United, they're getting better and better and better. And that's the difference. Manchester United haven't hit peak yet. And I think when you look at some of the performances from the teams around them that are going to be challenging for the title, some of them started the season off very well, but they've come off the pace a bit in terms of their performances. Whereas Manchester United, like I say, they're getting better. And let's not forget, in the next week or two, we're seeing Liverpool facing Manchester City, and we're seeing Chelsea face Tottenham. So someone's going to take points off someone there. And if Manchester United go about it the right way, so I'm not saying they can win the title, but they will have a big say in it. It's a good opportunity now for Manchester United in these next few games to really.
Phil, what do you think, Phil? What do you think the target is for United now? I mean, obviously playing consistently well. They're doing well in the league. They're still in Europa League. And what's the target?
2 targets, top 4 and improvement. Simple as that. Mourinho has to get. United, I think most United fans would accept not winning the league this year. What United have to get in the situation is when they approach the summer, it's a squad that needs tweaking, not overhaul. It's a squad where you could say, okay, I know the 7 or 8 of my players are good enough to give me a title run that I can trust. But when you're getting into situations where you need to make 4 and 5 changes, that's half a team. That United have to get in a situation where Chelsea are in, where you make 1 or 2 changes in the summer, and you're not changing the whole dynamic of the dressing room. So for me, that's what United's goal is. And I think once they get there, and Mourinho will get them there, then I trust I trust United over a 38-game season, and I believe that this is not form. This is genuine improvement. Danny, you talked about the top 4. You talked about a lot of big teams: United, Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham. Who's your top 4? Who misses out?
I think Chelsea, Liverpool. I think they will be in the top 4. Then I think it comes between Manchester City, Arsenal, Tottenham, and Manchester United. All 4 of them believe that they can get in there. The problem is, the one thing is for Manchester United and for Tottenham is the Europa League. I
think Arsenal miss out in the top 4. I think this is the year they miss out in the top 4.
Yeah, it could be. And I think that if we look at some of the fixtures that have been played and some of the fixtures that are coming up, Manchester United, they've played I think they've played all the top teams. Manchester City haven't played them all yet. Arsenal haven't played them all yet, as far as I'm aware. I think maybe they have, but some of them haven't. But the Europa League is going to be the key. How seriously is that taken? Because I know people go on about, well, it's the Champions League. It's the same different days as in terms of, you know, the recovery days that you've got. But it's not so much that. It's the fact that everything gets blown up because you're then playing on a Sunday, then you're playing a Thursday. And it's a difficult thing. And I think that will be interesting to see how seriously Manchester United and Tottenham take that, because I believe that any teams that are aiming to get in that top 4, challenge a top 2 or 3, you've got a decision to make. Do you think you've got more chance of winning the Europa League, which gives you a Champions League space? Or do you think you've got more chance of finishing in the top 4? So only the managers can decide that. But it's going to be an intriguing second part of the season. Obviously, Manchester United losing a player or so to the African nations. Liverpool losing Mane as well. He'll be a miss for them. But Chelsea don't have European football. Liverpool don't have European football, so that could be a little bit of a leveler as the game goes on, as the season goes on.
But the Europa League, really, where it is a massive inconvenience, is in the first half of the season, where you have to go to Ukraine. You've got. I know it's still a Thursday night game, but usually once you get into the knockout stages, it becomes a bit more manageable, does it not?
I think it does become more manageable, but the thing that can be a lot of the times is your preparation then for the next game. That's one of your big things. I've always said in England what they should do to make life easier for the Europa League teams, because Thursday knocks people a little bit out of the stride. Mm-hmm. What I would say is that at the start of the season, when you know everybody that's going to be in the Europa League, because you know early enough, you put yourself in a situation, you say, right, okay, all the teams that are involved in the Europa League, what you do, after every Europa League game on a Thursday, they play at home on the Sunday. We've seen it. We've seen Spain, Spanish teams, their games are changed to a Friday sometimes to give their teams the best possible opportunity to recuperate and be ready for the Champions League games. And I just think that from that point of view, the Premier League or whatever it is that makes the rules could turn around and say, okay, I tell you what, let's allow the teams that are in the Europa League, regardless of whether they play home or away on a Thursday in the Europa League, on the Sunday they play at home. And that for me is something that's very manageable.
Could even move the games to a Monday, I suppose, right? I mean, if you have those European games on a Thursday, most of the time in the Europa League, it's quite long treks that you're coming back from. A lot of Russian teams involved in it, Ukrainian teams, where you're talking a long trek to get back home. So it makes sense to have them play on that Sunday, later kickoff, or on the Monday, and in particular trying to push those games at home to give the domestic teams the best opportunity to perform. I actually think now, when you look at the way that Manchester United are playing, they are potentially one of the favourites to go on and lift that trophy. And it's not an easy trophy to win. If they were to win the Europa League, it would be a fantastic achievement.
And I think the way we look at it as well is the aim next year for Manchester United is the Champions League. And like we said before, you know, what is going to be easier to win? Is it going to be easier to get into the top 4, or is it going to be easier to win the Europa League? Because they both give you the same thing. Obviously, you get the glory if you win the Europa League, but it's all about getting back in that Champions League, because that will attract players.
Yeah,
no question about it. And that's where the top players want to be. The top players want to be playing Champions League. Manchester United have still had this aura about them, that they can attract the big players. Now, what you do, you bring Mourinho into a club like Manchester United. Not only are they coming to a huge football club, they're coming to work for a world-renowned manager as well. Yeah. We saw, you know, everybody wanted David Moyes to do well, but you saw what happened when David Moyes got in the job. All of a sudden, Manchester United, okay, they had Champions League football, but not so many people possibly wanted to not play under Moyes, but there was more exciting managers to go and work for. We've seen it with Jurgen Klopp. A really good pull. But Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp is an even bigger pull, and that's without Europe.
Danny, if Arsenal don't finish top 4, does Wenger go at the end of the season?
I think his job becomes very, very difficult. You know, we've said previously before that, you know, for me, Arsene Wenger, he changed the whole outlook of football in the Premier League when he first came in. The plays that he produced, the plays that he brought in, his style of football, the way that players live their life off the field. And no one can ever question what he's done for Arsenal Football Club. But the one thing I would say is that if he was at Manchester United, if he was at Chelsea, if he was at Manchester City, if he was at Liverpool, and he had the lack of success that he's had in the last 10, 12 years, he wouldn't be manager of that football club. That's the difference. Now, the one thing you would say is that Arsene Wenger has earned that respect, but it depends how different people see it. I think because football now is becoming so much more of a business, I think owners, chairmen, they see top 4 has been successful. Now, that's not what the supporters want, because that's not success. Yes, it's finishing top 4, but it's not silverware.
But on that point, because that's a really, really good point, and this I don't understand. I don't understand fans. I can understand the top 4 is a commercial goal, Danny, right?
Yeah.
I can understand why if you're an executive, top 4 is important. But fans celebrating top 4 over winning an FA Cup or something like that, to me, I'd rather win, especially Arsenal. Arsenal qualify for a competition they can't win. So I can understand the executives saying top 4 is more important to me than the FA Cup. But if I'm an Arsenal fan or a Tottenham fan, I'd rather win the FA Cup than celebrate finishing in the top 4 in a competition you can't win. Because neither Tottenham or Arsenal are going to.
I'm not sure the fans are happy with it though, Phil. I mean, the fans seem to be certainly disgruntled about it.
Top 4 is a big top 4. I mean, Arsenal were doing laps of honour when they finished. When they won top 4, the fans are going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, the business module works at Arsenal. What they've done financially, securing their stadium, obviously having that top 4 consistently Champions League football, even though they don't get too far in the competition. You know, the business module works for Arsenal and their executive board. But for Arsene Wenger, I mean, we all have to applaud what he's done in the Premier League and what he's brought. He's brought an entertaining style of football for Arsenal, and at times it's been quite boring, but there's also that excitement around Arsenal again that you just talked about there. When you go to watch a football club, you want to see entertainment. You don't know what you're going to get with Arsenal. You could get a boring 1-0 game like we've seen today against West Bromwich Albion. Even though we say it's boring, they had 26 shots, I think, in the match. So it was still an entertaining factor to the match. And there's a great pull to Arsenal, to London, to that football club that many other clubs don't necessarily have. It's Champions League football, like what Danny just talked about there. You can attract some of the big players, but why are they not making those signings? I don't get it. It's an unusual club to me.
He's just sticking up for him because Arsene Wenger's part Scottish. He must be. He must be. He never wants to spend any money.
I think at times it's a frustration because we've seen this season that Tottenham last season they worked so hard just to fall at the final hurdle and not win the Premier League. Yeah. But as you've just talked about, get into the top 4, then you get Champions League football. But then Tottenham go into the Champions League and decide to start resting players. So what's their aim again this season? To get into the Champions League. So their aim is to always get into the Champions League, and we've seen it with Arsene Wenger, but then rest players. So why bother talking about this goal is to get into the Champions League, and then when you get into the Champions League, rest players because you've got an important Premier League game. But that important Premier League game is to then get themselves back into the top 4 to get back into the Champions League the next season. So is it just finances then, Danny? Is it just that these teams are focusing on finances? For me, that's a great example. What you're talking about right there is a fight to get into the Champions League. And when you get into the competition, financially you benefit from it. But really, you should be trying to push on and do as well as you possibly can in that competition. I think that it's financially, yes, it's a huge game. It's massive. It's such a big competition. But I also think you put Tottenham Hotspur Champions League participants, all of a sudden that becomes more attractive to a player than Tottenham Hotspur Premier League or Tottenham Hotspur Europa League. So I think there's an attractiveness for players because we hear it so many times. If X, Y, or Z don't qualify for the Champions League, then they're going to struggle to sign certain players because the best players want Champions League football. But I just think that it's a vicious circle at times because what we're seeing is so many teams trying to get into the top 4. They're successful getting into the top 4, and then all of a sudden we're seeing them resting players in the Champions League and then falling by the wayside and going out the Champions League. But then even worse, going into the Europa League, which then affects them getting into the top 4.
All right, Danny.
Crazy.
Want to ask you one quick question, mate? We talked about Arsene Wenger in the next 6 months. Let's say they finish outside the top 4. There's not just the question of Arsene Wenger. There's a question of Alexis Sanchez. There's a question of Mesut Ozil. Do they sign new deals with Arsenal outside of the Champions League, regardless of what they offer?
It's an interesting one. I think that Arsenal's biggest problem in recent years is not just been losing some of their top players, but losing some of their top players to their domestic rivals. You know, we've talked about it before. Van Persie going to Arsenal, Nasri going to Manchester City, Clichy going to Manchester City. You go back,
and they all went and won titles, by the way.
Exactly. So, therefore, at some point, like you just said, Sanchez for me is one of the best players in the Premier League. At some point, he's probably going to think so, because I'm telling you now, he would fit into Liverpool's team. He'd fit into Manchester City's team. He'd fit into Manchester United's team. And, you know, they're going to be, and he'd fit into Chelsea's team, whichever way you want to look at it. So they are going to be your main competitors that are probably going to have a great opportunity of winning the Premier League. And that's what's happened with a lot of these players. A lot of these players that have moved on, they haven't said, I'm leaving Arsenal because I'm going to get more money. They've left Arsenal and said, right, I want to go and win trophies. The list is endless. And that's the problem with Arsenal. It's not so much losing their better players, because it's even Manchester United have lost some of their better players over the years. You look at Ronaldo, he wanted to go and play for Real Madrid, so they've lost him. It's who you lose them to. If you lose them to a domestic rival, that's where you create problems for yourself. And that was exactly what happened. The most recent time was Van Persie when he went to Manchester United.
All right. On the same note, let's talk Oscar. Move to China. You're talking about players wanting to move to win trophies, players wanting to move to benefit their career, to improve, to get better, to challenge themselves. What sense can you make? And Phil, I want to hear from you as well about this transfer. I don't see the benefit outside of the financial benefit for potentially his family and for himself at 25 years old to make that move. I don't understand it.
No, I couldn't agree more. I've had it's something I've been thinking about and chatting about really as well, is that you look at him, he's not in his 30s, he's not coming towards the end of his career. So you think, okay, yeah, go and have one last payday and, you go and experience some of a lifestyle. We're talking about a player that's probably not even hit his peak yet. And he's going to go over to China. And yes, he's handsomely paid. Let's not forget, he will have been handsomely paid at Chelsea as well. No question about that. And he could have gone to another top club in the Premier League. And I think it's worrying. I think it's worrying when we're starting to see these players that haven't even reached their peak go into China, because they are going there for one reason only, and that's the money. And that is money that is the Premier League probably can't compare with it, but can't compete with it. But would Premier League teams want to compete with it? I think Jurgen Klopp's come out and said things already, and rightly so. It's not right. Listen, each to their own. You wish him all the best. He's going to go and earn this money. But for me, you want to experience as much success as you can. I worked hard all my career, didn't play for one of them teams that had all that success. But at the end of your career, you want to be able to look back and go, wow, I did everything I could. I won the Premier League. I won the Champions League and things like that. Okay, Oscar will be able to count his money, which is fair enough. But so will the majority of players that play in the top echelons of the Premier League. So for me, it's not great, because it's a move that is motivated by money, not success. And you just hope it's something that doesn't catch on, because you want it to be about players looking for success. For example, Van Persie, there was a lot of talk when he went to Arsenal to Manchester United that Manchester City wanted him as well. And Manchester City offered him a whole lot more money, apparently. But he went to Manchester United because he was getting paid well enough, but not just that, he believed he could get more success. And that's what you want to see from players. Yeah.
I think this very much depends on the individual. Some players will go and play for Aleppo FC for the right money, right? Here's the thing. What does this change? Oscar can make enough money at Chelsea to live comfortably the rest of his life. Making this type of money allows him to take care of his immediate family and their kids. So he's essentially sold his football career to go and play in China, where there's nothing he can win that will ever be worth putting on a mantelpiece. And so it doesn't matter what he does in China, it's not ready. But financially motivated moves for career sacrifices are not new in football. We've seen this. I remember when Anzhi Makachkla in Russia, Karamov started spending money, and players were rushing to get out there. Hulk going to Zenit for unbelievable amounts of money, turning down top clubs to go and do this. This is not new, and so. But you just look at Oscar and you think he's 25, right about there, very good player. I can understand this at 30, but and that money's still going to be earned 5 years. Obviously, there's the X factor with a footballer. What if he breaks his leg?
I disagree with you a little bit on the move. When you talk about Hulk, he was still competing in European competition, so he still had an opportunity to go on and do something personal to try and win a Champions League. They were a good side. They did quite well in the Champions League, but also domestically they were cleaning up. Whereas China, on the other hand, is a domestic league that is clearly not ready. It's spending a lot of money to try and benefit their own country and their youth development of kids in China, which I fully understand and respect. Yeah. But to see people at 25 years old, one of the top players in the Premier League, in my opinion, decide to move from the Premier League, which is the greatest league in the world, and you're getting paid handsomely already, playing for one of the best clubs in the Premier League, to go to China, it's almost as if you disappear off the face of the earth. Yeah. The money means nothing after that.
It's for me, it's the age. It's the age. That's the concerning thing, in my opinion. You know, I often believe you look at footballers and they reach their peak, 28, 29, 30. We're talking about a player that's not even reached the peak of his powers yet.
Whereabouts is that team in China that he's going to, Ian? Do you know?
No, but I'm going to look it up for you right now.
Because if you're going to somewhere like Shanghai or Beijing, you have to also take into consideration.
Yeah, he's playing in Shanghai.
Shanghai. I don't know what the situation is in Shanghai, but in Beijing, it's not, you can't. There's days you can't go outside and breathe the air. I mean, I don't know. For me, that is selling your football career. And
Andres Villas-Boas is his manager there, so he's got a decent coach at least. But Shanghai's a great city. Nothing against China and the country or the city in particular. It's fantastic. I'm sure his standard of life is great, but football-wise, football career, you know, I'm really disappointed, and it is worrying, like you just said, Danny. That the word is worrying. You know, players and good players are deciding to give up their career, sell their careers. You just said, Phil, sell your career to go to China.
Well, I think the thing is that another player has moved over there recently, but has not made the headlines because he's older. Tevez. Yeah. But that's everybody else is saying, listen, good luck to him. He's been there, he's done it. He's a lot older.
Yeah.
So it is for me, it's not about how much he's getting paid. It's not about the club he's leaving. It's not about the club that he's joining. It's the age in which he's doing it. And I think your perfect comparison is Tevez. Tevez will be going somewhere and probably earning the same, if not round about what he's earning. But nobody's saying too much because he's coming towards the other end of the later stages of his career. He's not 24, 25. And that's the worrying thing. That's the concerning thing, is in terms of how many other players will do this now.
Yeah.
Money. Now, is Oscar, I've just said Oscar shouldn't be anywhere near his peak yet, 28, 29. And the reason you're at your 28, 29 is because you're at your physical peak powers, mentality-wise. You learn a lot about being a player. You're playing with fantastic players. You've had experiences. So I would say now, hand on heart, 100%, if Oscar stayed in the Premier League for the next 4 years, got to 29, and you compare Oscar playing in China for the next 4 years at 29, Oscar playing in China at 29, that level. Oscar playing in the Premier League at 29, up here. That's the difference. Yeah. He will stagnate as a player now. He's not going to get better playing in China because you're not, no disrespect, but you're not playing with better players and you're not playing against better players. So therefore, he's not going to get better.
Yeah, and the big problem for him, of course, is did he also sell his international career? Because playing for Brazil means an awful lot to these lads, and I just find that incredibly sad. I mean, look, they don't begrudge anybody, but it's not like these guys are not making amazing amounts of money.
Phil, you just mentioned Hulk there, one of Oscar's new teammates on this Shanghai side. Hulk.
Yeah, Hulk Oscar. How long before Big Bird makes it over?
Unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy. It is unbelievable. Anyway, back to the Premier League. Chelsea today, another convincing victory. 12 consecutive Premier League wins now. I think it's a club record, and it's a Premier League record as well, with only conceding 2 goals, 10 shutouts in that time. That's quite impressive to me. Are they your title favourites, Danny?
Yes, they are. And all right, the goals they're scoring, okay, but for me, it's their defence. What is it? Conceded 2 goals in, I think, 12 or 13 games now. That for me is what it is. That means that they can go and they can score 1 goal in a game and they're going to win the game. That, for me, is incredible. Everybody had a big thing to say about Mourinho earlier in the week. Oh, he's had a dig at Chelsea because he came out and said that defensively they're very strong and they're hard to break down. It was a backhanded compliment. It was a backhanded compliment. The fact that they can go out anywhere, they know they're going to score a goal, they know they can keep clean sheets. And as of yet, no teams can work them out because defensively, they will go into, you know, a 3-5-2 when they're defending, or even a 5-2-3. When they're attacking, though, they become a 3-2-5. We saw last week Azpilicueta going forward from one of the centre-back positions, Diego Costa scoring the goal. And you look at Kante's booking and you look at Diego Costa's booking, they knew what they were doing. They 100% knew what they were doing, because this is the lesser of the games they've got to play. Imagine they play today, didn't get booked. Imagine they play their next game, which I think is against Stoke City. They got booked. All of a sudden, they're missing the game against Tottenham. So, you know, there's ways and means of doing things, and they've got a squad that can capitalise on that. And
smart play as well, Danny, when you do something like that.
They've found in their back pocket as well.
It's quite smart.
Yeah, I remember when they were going to play United, Diego Costa wanted to come off so he wouldn't get booked for that match. But big concern in this country for Bob Bradley. They've shipped another 4 today. Bob Bradley said before the West Ham game this was a must-win game. Some rumours in the media this week that certain players don't like his training methods. You don't want to sack a guy before he's had a chance to put his to put his ideas across. But if he loses his next games, he's sacked.
It's the time of the year. It wouldn't surprise me, because the thing is, the owners have brought him into the football club, and they're the ones that have put the faith and the trust in him. There now becomes 2 issues. A, can he get them out of the position that they are in? And B, they need new players. Do the owners trust him with money in January? So it becomes 2 things. It's twofold. It's not just, is he going to be good enough to get us out of the problem that we're in? That's why we see sackings around about this time of the year. Because chairman, owners are looking at it and going, right, okay, do we trust the manager? Because we need to go and spend money in January. Do we trust the manager to be able to go out and spend that money? Well, if we don't, we need to get rid of him and bring someone else in. Now, problem that Bob Bradley's got, Llorente finds himself on the bench again today. Another change of system, playing 4-3-3, conceding goals again. They've now conceded the most goals in the league. They're not one of the lowest scorers. They've scored a few goals, but I've always said that defences keep you in leagues. Yeah. It's as simple as that. You know, that's why we're seeing Burnley. That's why we're seeing Middlesbrough doing okay. That's why we're seeing, okay, Sunderland, you know, they conceded 3 today, but that's why you're going to see them start to climb up the league. That's why Hull are right down there, and that's why Swansea are right down there, and Crystal Palace as well. Crystal Palace, I think, before today, there was only the top 5 that had scored more than them. But there was only 2 teams that conceded more. They found themselves right near the foot of the table. So you build from the back. But to me, I've done Swansea games a few times while Bob Bradley's been in charge. And the problem's been is that in the Premier League, you are at your most vulnerable when you're attacking, because people are so concentrating on the transition, the turnover, the counter-attack. Yeah. And Swansea have left themselves wide open time and time again. And you can guarantee most of the goals that Bob Bradley's team have conceded have come against what people would say the run of play on the counter-attack, because they're not. You have to be at your most defensively strong when you're attacking because of the turnover, and that's where Swansea are falling down. Everybody's going forward, and there's no real defensive shape about them.
It's unusual for me to see an American in charge of a Premier League club not necessarily focusing on hard work mentality, defensive, being difficult to beat. It's almost as if Bob Bradley's gone there and found it very difficult to implement his own ideas. And what ideas are they? Because they're shipping goals left, right and centre. I don't see enough from Swansea. I mean, the first goal today was an embarrassment. The goalkeeper had a great opportunity to get rid of the ball, and as he goes down to the ground, I can't remember. I think it was Fabianski who was in goals. Yeah, and he sort of palmed it and didn't get full connection on the ball, and you go a goal down, and immediately it's very difficult then to claw yourself back in the Premier League from going a goal down. So, Bob Bradley, for me, Phil, I think that he should be gone now. I don't think that Swansea they won't have too much of a timeline on him. I'm hearing potentially his contract's a short-term contract where there is an easy get-out clause for them at the end of the year. It'll be interesting to see if that does come to fruition. As Danny just mentioned there, if they spend money, will they trust this guy who's lost so many games, who's conceded so many goals, to spend a lot of money? Is he the man for their future? Because that's what the question's going to be. Is Bob Bradley, if things start to turn around, going to be our man for the future? I don't believe he is. I think he's really struggling for the dressing room control there.
How much does this damage Bradley?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. I mean, Bob Bradley, it's not just Bob Bradley that we're talking about here. We're talking about Americans in particular. Because this is the first American coach to coach in the Premier League. So he went there with a bit of pressure on his shoulders, knowing that he was representing every other American coach who was to follow him into the Premier League. No. Might not be, but it is true, right? Because you've got a reputation to follow. You were a US national team coach. You did well in France. You did well in Scandinavia. Very good coach, and I haven't necessarily played for him, but I've played against some of his teams, and he's a very, very organized man, and always very difficult to play against because they're so energetic. There's power, there's running, and I don't see that from this Swansea side. It's almost as if when I watch them play, there's a lack of belief, there's a lack of confidence. The body language from the players is down. It was probably like that before he got there. But he's not the guy to pick them up, and clearly we're seeing the results of that.
I think one of the problems that Swansea have, and they had it last season as well, because let's not forget they were in a relegation fight last season as well. Since then, they've lost Ayew, and they've lost, for me, their leader, their main leader. They lost Ashley Williams. He's gone to Everton. Now, if we look at Swansea earlier on in their tenure in the Premier League, you know, they were always seen as free-flowing, lovely football. Now, I've said it on numerous occasions. That is fine when you're in. You know, when you're in the top 12 of the Premier League, that's fine. You can do that. The problem is now Swansea, like they did last season and like they're finding this season now, is that it's a different type of football at the bottom of the league. You have to scrap your way. You have to roll your sleeves up. You have to go and do the dirty things that you don't have to do if you're 10th or 11th. Yeah. So the question could be is, regardless of who is the manager, have they got enough players with that mentality in the team? They've lost players, and some of the players that they've lost have been the ones that have had that mentality to roll the sleeves up and grind out the results. So it's a difficult one. And as for Bob Bradley, also as well, if you're the owner of the football club, Bob Bradley will have been to them and said, listen, because you always do forward planning, these are the players I want in January. These are the players that I want to bring in to make a difference. Now, if a new manager does come in before January, he's got, 4 or 5 days before the transfer window opens up to go to the chairman and say, right, we've identified this player, we've identified that player. That is near enough impossible. With Sam Allardyce, very different, because he's very well known throughout England. He has all his contacts in England. If he wants to go and do a deal, he can try and get a deal done in 24 hours. Whereas someone like Bob Bradley and a lot of the owners at Swansea that are new to it, it takes a lot longer. So
that's a great point.
To see what they do.
He's targeted Ronaldo, Messi, and Levi.
Still wouldn't be enough, I don't think. Their next 2 games are quite big games. So they're at home to Bournemouth on the 31st, and then just after New Year, they're at Crystal Palace, and then they're at Hull 4 days after that. So those 3 games, potentially, if he's not fired already or not fired before New Year's, if he doesn't get points from those games, he's definitely gone, surely.
Well, you would have to say that it's a massive possibility. But like I say, you know, for me, the one thing I would say, as we talked about the top of the Premier League, January more often than not being such a busy time. The bottom of the league, that's where it's at. I remember Stoke City, our first year in the Premier League, we were going along okay. We were still near the bottom third of the Premier League, without doubt, near the relegation zone. We went out and bought James Beattie and Matthew Etherington. And those were the 2 players that we needed. And what you also have to do, if you're a team that is going to sign, Newcastle made this mistake when they got relegated last year. If you're a team at the bottom of the league, you have to go and sign players that have something to prove, not that are just coming for the money. Yeah. You have to sign players that have got something to prove. That's what Tony Pulis was very good at Stoke City. So you also have to get the right caliber of player, because most players will tell you they don't want to be in a relegation fight. There's no question about that. Right. So you've got to make sure that players aren't just coming for the money. Also, otherwise, it's 1 step forward to go 2 backwards. So whoever's bringing in the players, they've got to make sure that they're the right players. But like you see with Bob Bradley, it's all new to him. So he's got to make sure he gets the right characters in the dressing room.
Danny, last question before you go. I want to ask you about Sam Allardyce and Alan Pardew. How damaged is Alan Pardew's reputation with what happened at Crystal Palace? Do you rate him as a manager? And Big Sam doesn't get enough credit for. He embraces modern football. I mean, everyone thinks he's one of these.
He was ahead of his time.
Yeah, everyone thinks he's one of these old style English coaches that his methods are decades old. Sam Allardyce is a guy that embraces modern technology, sports science, and has, to be fair,
one of the first ones to do it in the Premier League.
Yes, and always done. To be fair, he always does a good job. Two-part question. So, does he work at Palace, and how damaged is Alan Pardew by what happened?
I think with Alan Pardew, what he tried to do, we saw the signings that he made in the summer. In Benteke in particular, he tried to do a role reversal from last season. Last season, defensively, they were solid. They were strong, but they struggled to score goals. This season, like I say, it's been complete role reversal. Free scoring, as I mentioned before today's games, there was only the top 5 that scored more than them, but they were conceding so many goals. I think on 2 occasions scored 4 goals but didn't win the game. That for me is incredible to do that in a season. So I think Sam Allardyce has looked at it and said, right, okay, they had a fantastic defense. Well, not fantastic, but they had a good defense last year. Them players are still there. We didn't have such a free scoring team going forward. Now we've brought in players. We've brought in Townsend. We've brought in Benteke that can get us them goals. We've got Zaha that's a very good player, very talented player. So I think Sam Allardyce is a fantastic appointment because he will get the best of both worlds there. As for Alan Pardew, I think he will have learned a lot from it because I think that in the summer, people will probably turn around to him and say, listen, we have to be more attractive. We have to be more expansive. Mm-hmm. And I think he tried to go from A to Z or A to Z very, very quickly instead of having a middle area. And that's been the problem that I think that they've had. They tried to change too much too quickly. But, well, listen, Alan Pardew, 3-4 months ago, he's been talked to as the next England manager. So he won't be out of a job for long. It's just dependent on what level he wants to get the job and whether people see him as a Premier League manager or whether he has to go down to the Championship now and work his way back up again.
If anything, it just goes to show you how competitive the Premier League is. When you're all of a sudden talked about being the potential next England coach, then all of a sudden you find yourself in a relegation battle. You then get in the headlines for the wrong reasons financially. Then the pressure is really on you if you don't start to pick up games and pick up wins. And clearly that's what's happened to him. I do like the Sam Allardyce appointment, though. I think that's a very good one. And the fact that they got him or convinced him to come out of the little vacation period that he's been on since his escape from the England national team manager position. And I do call it an escape, Danny. Sorry to say that, but he got away with that one there because that's a difficult job. And now what's happened to him with the bad headlines and the bad press, all of a sudden he's been thrusted back into the Premier League saviour, and now he's back into that good light again. And the media side, they want to see him do well at Crystal Palace.
Yes.
And I think that's a good thing for Big Sam and a very good thing for Crystal Palace.
Yeah, definitely. I think Crystal Palace it's a magnificent appointment. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And like you just said about the media-wise, Sam Allardyce has always been fantastic with the media. So the media want to see him do well. There's no doubt about it. Everyone wanted him to get the England job. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But I think Crystal Palace, I think they will now finish mid-table without a problem at all.
I agree. Danny, as always, mate, thanks very much. We'll catch up again next week, mate. Glad you had a brilliant Christmas. Great job that you're doing the United match on the American feed. We had you out here. And,
top job.
All the best, mate. Cheers, Danny.
Have a great new year.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right. Let me just... Yep. Okay. Great chat there with Danny Haig, of course. Danny's going to be on the show every Monday with us here at BTP. And it's always interesting stuff, mate. Before we go, you anything to add before we sign off?
No, I think the Premier League right now is so competitive that what we're seeing right now, week in and week out, is the stories starting to appear left, right, and centre from multiple different clubs, right? You're seeing Chelsea getting this incredible record of 12 straight consecutive wins is just unbelievable in the Premier League. Manchester United now finding their form, getting back. Yep. Liverpool with their form, obviously recently hampered with the news of Firmino and his driving ban, whether he'll miss a match or two. I think... Liverpool are a dangerous side, and they're the team that really has that great opportunity outside of Manchester City that can catch Chelsea. But it's up to Chelsea right now to throw it away. And we've talked about it so many times. There's some great leagues in the world, and obviously the Bundesliga is very close to my heart. But the stories right now, after what happened last season in the Premier League, they just keep coming, Phil. Yeah. It's just fantastic. It's almost as like you're an addict when you're watching this football, and it's top to bottom. The relegation battle, the Bob Bradley situation, what's going on in mid-table. I'm following Middlesbrough because my good friend Kay Murray's a big fan of Middlesbrough. I mean, the stories are just no end, and the Premier League blows me away week in and week out. I haven't watched enough games this year to really get stuck into it, but I'm happy right now there's a break from the European game so I can sit back, relax, and just get engulfed in all the action right now. It's brilliant to watch.
Yeah, but we'll do a transfer show, folks, sometime the next week or so. Maybe the next time we do a show, mate, we'll have to sit down. We'll go through everything that we see happening in January, some inside information that
Go off to China, mate.
yeah, but we do a show where we talk about what we see happening in January and based on some information that we have through our web of contacts. Thanks very much for watching this on the first Google Hangout. We're going to do more and more of these. Looking forward to doing these throughout next year with more and more guests. Thanks as always for tuning in, folks. Thanks for following us on Facebook. Thanks for following us on Twitter and all that there. As we develop this platform, it's going to get better and better. So thanks very much for watching these and for all the feedback. Ian, adios, mate.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year, mate.
Holidays. Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Hope you all had a lovely Christmas and happy New Year. And we will see you back. What day is today? Monday. What day is Thursday? When are we back?
It's a big game at the end of this year, Phil. I'll just bring it up to you right now. I've got a good one at the end of this year for Fox. It's a little game called the Old Firm, Rangers versus Celtic at the end of this year. I'm on the broadcast for that one, so I'm looking forward to that game.
Oh, yes. Oh, we'll have to preview that the next time we're on. So we'll be Thursday the 29th, Ian, back Thursday 29th. Just lost my co-host. We'll be back Thursday 29th, folks. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you then. Cheers.